guys, Guitar Shop TV here in New York City at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and we are here for a special exhibit called Guitar Heroes. It's some of the great Archtop guitars of all time. You're not going to believe this. Check it out. We're delighted to be joined today by the curator of this exhibit, Jason Kerr-Dobney. Jason, welcome to the show.
We often look at the people that make the instruments rather than the players. And so with the title Guitar Heroes, we wanted to switch up. Normally we think of the great players. We wanted to focus on some of the great makers, and especially on some of the New York Italian-American craftsmen like John D'Angelico, James D'Acquisto, and of course the living maker, John Monteleone. We have an instrument that belongs to Chet Atkins.
Look at this.
Chet Atkins actually wrote in his autobiography, compared owning a D'Angelico to owning a Rolls Royce. To him it was like
top of the line status symbol.
And he used his D'Angelico in the early 50s, 50 to 53, about recordings with the Carter sisters. And the New Yorker was really his top of the line guitar. He became famous for his Art Deco styling. So you see, for example, this famous stair-step tailpiece that you were mentioning. He took the name New Yorker not from those of us that live here or from the magazine, took it from the New Yorker Hotel, which was one of these great Art Deco buildings in New York City, built in 1930. There's an image of it on the wall behind us here. And he sort of had his own stylization of that profile on the headstock. And it's beautiful, and he mimics it on the truss rod cover too. You have that same.
Well, yeah, look at that. That is exactly, that's the New Yorker Hotel. Look
absolutely. D'Acquisto worked with D'Angelico for about 12, 13 years in this traditional old world style apprenticeship, doing everything. What D'Acquisto really became famous for was his modernistic pieces, of course, and that was something he had this passion for. This is his solo model. He had these sort of more modern models he introduced beginning in the mid-80s. And this was built for the famous collector Scott Chinnery, who used to say that this guitar would call to him. He had 1,000 guitars, and he'd wake up in the middle of the night with this guitar calling to him to go be played. Very famously, another one of the guitars that James D'Acquisto built for Scott Chinnery, the great guitar collector, was this blue, what he called Blue Centura Deluxe, which was a gorgeous instrument. You've got this great cutout in the headstock. Of course, he's not signing his guitars by this point. You've got these really distinctively shaped F-holes. Beautiful instrument. And less than a year after he made this, D'Acquisto died. He died in '95. So that brings us to the modern living maker, John Monteleone. And unlike the previous generations, when he was coming of age, economically speaking, it wasn't possible to be an apprentice. Acoustic guitars in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, there was no market for them. Everything was electric. And of course, the whole American economy was functioning differently. So he is self-taught. He grew up in a family of craftsmen. His uncles, his father, taught him the skills. And so he's down in his basement building guitars as a high school student and trying to figure these things out. Well, this comes from the idea that when you're playing an acoustic guitar, the person sitting in front of you has a better sound than the player does because of where the sound holes go. So the idea here is to get the sound pointing up at the player to give them that better flavor of the instrument. So you see these on a lot of John's instruments.
That's amazing.